The sound came from somewhere beneath the cobblestones. Witnesses swore they heard it, an unnatural burst of laughter, too jagged, too sharp to be human. It echoed down an alleyway in Boston's South End on a December night in 1887, just as the snow began to fall. Moments later, a girl was found, her body folded unnaturally, her mouth torn into a grotesque smile. The newspapers called it an accident. The police called it hysteria. But those who lived in the neighborhood whispered a name they were afraid to say too loudly: the Laughing Man. The story you are about to hear is one that history tried to bury. It does not appear in the archives, the journals, or the sanitized history of the Victorian age in America. It survived only in fragments, sermons given in trembling voices, letters never sent, and the testimony of children who vanished from orphanages without record. What you will learn is not a simple murder case. It is the story of an institution that allowed something ancient, something corrupt, to walk among us, and it began with laughter. Boston in the late 19th century was a city of contradiction. The cobbled streets glimmered with gaslight and wealth, yet in the shadows of Beacon Hill and the South End, poverty bled through. Children roamed the alleys barefoot. Churches overflowed with sermons about morality while their basements hid things unspoken. The first reports of the Laughing Man were not printed in the press. They appeared in parish logs, scribbled notes about strange disturbances near the orphan wards, and unsettling expressions among the younger boys. Priests described night terrors spreading like contagion, children waking with bleeding gums, all claiming they had dreamed of a man who crouched at the foot of their beds, chuckling softly. One priest wrote, "The laughter does not belong to him alone. It passes from child to child like an infection. I hear it now in the walls." The murders began soon after. On January 3, 1888, the Boston police dragged the body of 12-year-old Samuel Clark from the frozen Charles River. His face was locked in a horrific grin, as though some invisible hand had carved joy into his features. The medical examiner concluded exposure to the cold, but his mother knew better. She swore she heard someone laughing outside her home the night he disappeared. It was then that whispers of London's infamous Ripper began to surface. Could the Laughing Man be an American reflection of the horror across the Atlantic? Some insisted the killings were ritual, tied to older European blood cults smuggled into America through the churches. Others claimed the city officials were complicit. Why else suppress the reports, silence the grieving families, and bury the children quickly without proper rites? The truth is this: Samuel was not the first. He was only the first they could not hide. By spring, the deaths were undeniable. Street girls, young boys from the orphanage, even a factory worker found with his jaw locked open in death. But one detail linked them all. Each had attended St. Matthew's Seminary within days of their disappearance. The seminary was a fortress of stone, its windows tall and narrow, its gates always closed after dusk. Inside, the church taught discipline, piety, and obedience. But beneath the chapel, there was another room, spoken of only in half. Sentences, where the priests said confessions were taken too far. A whistleblower later testified that the Laughing Man was not a stranger in the streets. He was invited in. He was part of the rituals, and those who laughed with him never laughed alone. The children of St. Matthew's orphanage whispered about him long before the adults admitted his existence. They said he came when the lamps burned low, when the nuns' voices faded behind locked dormitory doors. He crouched beside their beds, smelling of damp stone and candle smoke, and laughed, not loudly, but as if sharing a joke meant only for the listener. The sisters dismissed these tales as nightmares, punishing any child who spoke of the man. Yet journals discovered decades later reveal that many of the nuns heard it too. One entry reads, "We forbid the children to speak of him, but his laughter is in the rafters now. We hear it when we pray." What terrified them most was not his presence, but the aftermath, for the laughter was contagious. Children would wake the next morning giggling uncontrollably, their eyes unfocused, their lips cracked with blood. Some stopped speaking altogether, except to mimic the laugh hour after hour until they were taken away by carriage and never returned. The police knew, they always knew. Reports filed in 1888 describe incidents of morbid laughter during seizures and bodies with unnatural rictus. Yet these files were never meant for the public. They were kept in locked drawers marked with the word unsubstantiated. Why? Because to acknowledge the killings meant acknowledging the church's role. Many officers owed their careers to the parish network. To accuse St. Matthew's Seminary was to end one's livelihood or life. One detective, Patrick O'Malley, dared to break ranks. In a letter to his wife he wrote, "They say it is one man, but I believe it is something older, something the priests keep chained beneath stone, and when it laughs, the chains loosen." O'Malley was found weeks later, floating in the river beside the boy he had sworn to protect. His lips, too, were smiling. By 1889, Boston's orphanages reported more than 60 missing children. Official census records, however, show no such losses. Pages were scrubbed clean, names vanished, children erased as if they had never been born. In 1932, a fire at the State Archive destroyed much of the paper trail from that period, but survivors claimed the fire was deliberate, set by men who spoke Latin prayers as the smoke filled the holes. They burned history to protect something sacred or profane, but fragments survive, lists scrawled in margins, handwritten accounts from grieving mothers, and a chilling note found in the seminary's ledger. 61 entered, 40 returned, the rest remain in laughter. Accounts from defectors describe a chamber beneath St. Matthew's Chapel, its stone walls streaked with wax, its altar carved with symbols older than Christianity. The priests called it the Room of Joy. Here, children were brought to confront their fears. But the rituals always ended the same, the sound of laughter swelling until the torches flickered. Some children returned hollow-eyed, smiling without cause. Others never returned at all. A witness wrote in his journal, "It was not the priests who laughed, but something behind them. They opened the door and it entered. It has no face, only a mouth too wide, too hungry. And when it laughs, you feel your soul shrink." By the turn of the century, the killings slowed, but they did not stop. Instead, they became whispers. The laughing man became a cautionary tale, a story mothers told to keep their children indoors. But the city was complicit. Politicians who donated generously to St. Matthew's looked the other way. Newspapers shifted the blame to disease, to accidents, to childhood hysteria. Those who knew better stayed silent. For laughter had become a contagion not just among the children, but in the very soul of Boston itself. To this day, the foundations of St. Matthew's Seminary remain sealed, the records gone, the graves unmarked. Yet residents still swear that on cold nights, when the river freezes over, you can hear him, not screaming, not speaking, laughing. Not every child was taken forever. Some were returned, but they came back. Different, parents described them as hollow, their laughter unnatural, erupting at inappropriate times, during funerals, during prayers, during moments of silence. One girl, Margaret Doyle, was found sitting at the dinner table, giggling while her baby brother choked on bread beside her. She did not move to help. She simply laughed as the child turned blue. When her father struck her across the face to stop the noise, she turned to him with tears of blood running from her eyes, whispering, "He thinks it's funny." Doctors diagnosed these children with hysteria. But in asylum records scrawled in the margins, one chilling note appears again and again. They do not laugh for themselves. They laugh for him. In 1902, Father Elias Ward, a priest from St. Matthew's, confessed on his deathbed to something that was never meant to leave the walls of the seminary. His statement, hastily recorded by a nurse, reads, "We did not create him. We inherited him. He came with the land, with the stones. The laughter was already here when the first chapel was built. The rituals were not for God, but to keep him pleased. To keep him chained, but chains rust and faith weakens. He feeds on the young because their souls are still soft, still pliable." Father Ward's confession was never published. The document was sealed, hidden away by the archdiocese. But fragments survived in whispered family lore, handed down like a curse. Some families of Boston carried scars that outlived the century. Descendants of those who lost children to the laughing man often bore strange inheritances, fits of uncontrollable laughter, aversion to candlelight, dreams of stone corridors, and a voice that mocked them from the dark. One family, the Crowleys, kept their doors locked tight every December, refusing to leave the house after sundown. Their patriarch claimed that the laughter could still be heard in the snow, that it moved from generation to generation, waiting for a new child to claim. Another family was driven entirely mad. Records from Danvers State Hospital show 3 sisters, admitted within weeks of each other, each repeating the same phrase in a monotone voice: "He will never stop laughing, never." There were attempts, brief, fragile attempts, to expose the truth. In 1910, a journalist named Henry Greeley published a series of articles titled The Smiling Death, linking the orphan disappearances to St. Matthew's Seminary. He claimed to have uncovered hidden chambers and ledgers soaked in candle wax and blood. 2 weeks later, Greeley vanished. His body was never recovered. His wife was found in their home, sitting upright in a chair, smiling so widely her cheeks had torn open. After that, no newspaper dared touch the story. The seminary stood untouched, its gates locked, its doors barred. But the laughter did not stop. By the 1920s, the legend of the Laughing Man had seeped into Boston folklore. Children dared each other to walk past the old seminary after dark. Some swore they heard giggles leaking from beneath the stones. Others claimed they saw candlelight flickering in the chapel windows, though the building had been abandoned for years. Neighbors complained of unsettling noises, scraping, murmuring, and above all, laughter that seemed to come from the ground itself. City officials dismissed it as superstition, but construction workers who dug near the foundation of St. Matthew's reported strange vibrations, like a voice humming through the soil. One worker quit on the spot, refusing to touch the earth again. His words still survive in family letters: "You don't bury laughter, it buries you." In 1927, a survivor emerged. Thomas Avery, once a child of St. Matthew's, testified before a small gathering of reformers investigating church abuse. His voice shook as he recalled the nights underground. "They told us we were chosen, that the laughter was proof of holiness, but it wasn't holiness, it was hunger. It crept into our lungs, made us laugh until we bled. Some begged to stop, but once you start, you can't. He laughs through you. He keeps you alive just long enough to hear your own laughter turn against you." Thomas disappeared days later. Some believe he was silenced by the church. Others claim he ended his own life, unable to silence the echo still inside him. His testimony was buried in a forgotten archive, but the words linger like a curse. In 1934, during routine repairs near the seminary grounds, workers unearthed bones, small bones, dozens of them. Officials quickly sealed the site, claiming they belonged to victims of a long-forgotten epidemic. But locals knew better. Whispers spread that the remains were buried hastily, without coffins, without prayers. Some skulls bore jaws locked in grotesque smiles. Others had teeth worn down, as though laughter itself had ground them away. The site was covered over, marked with no memorial, but Boston's soil remembers. Rain still uncovers fragments, tiny ribs, broken teeth, shards of jawbone, each one a reminder of what the city chose to hide. In the 1940s, St. Matthew's Seminary was finally condemned, its windows shattered, its doors rotting. Yet those who entered the ruins came back changed. Soldiers returning from the war used the place to drink, but many left pale, claiming they heard laughter in the stone, vibrating like a heartbeat. One veteran swore he heard his mother's voice laughing at him from the walls. Another was found days later, hanging in his own home, a note pinned to his chest. He thinks it's funny. The building was sealed with iron bolts, its lower chambers filled with concrete. But laughter is not stopped by stone. It seeps, it lingers, it waits. Even after the seminary's closure, the children of Boston whispered of the Laughing Man. During the Great Depression, kids playing in the alleyways invented games around him. One child would crouch in the shadows, making the sound of laughter, while the others dared each other to step closer. Parents dismissed it as harmless play, until children began disappearing again. One girl was found standing on a rooftop, giggling uncontrollably as she swayed on the ledge. Another boy was discovered in the basement of his tenement, scratching symbols into the dirt, laughing until his nails tore off. The game spread across neighborhoods like a plague, and then, suddenly, it stopped. But the silence was worse than the laughter, because it meant the game no longer needed to be played. He had already returned. The final mention of the Laughing Man in church records comes from 1949, written by Father Benedict Hale. His diary reads, "The city believes the laughter has ended. They do not hear it, they do not feel it, but we priests still know. We sealed him, yes, but only in the way one seals a crypt. Stone cannot silence eternity. I have heard his mirth in the sacristy, in the pews, in my dreams. He is not gone, he is patient, and he is amused by our foolish hope. Days after writing this, Father Hale vanished. His parishioners found only his vestments folded neatly on the altar, and a faint echo that rolled through the empty chapel like thunder. Tonight, the ruins of St. Matthew's Seminary stand buried beneath layers of concrete and modern development. Office buildings rise where children once prayed. Commuters walk streets paved over bones. No one speaks of the laughter anymore, but history has not forgotten. Some nights, guards patrolling the district claim to hear giggles carried on the wind. Construction crews have reported vibrations in the ground that sound like a voice. And every few years a child in Boston is found, smiling too widely, laughing at nothing. The laughing man is no myth. He is the sickness beneath the stones, the joy that devours, the laughter that chains the living to the dead. And if you listen closely, you will hear him still, not in the streets, not in the ruins, but in your own throat, waiting ready until the moment you laugh when you shouldn't, and realize the voice is no longer yours.